Hello, everyone, and welcome to the experience. So glad to have you, and it's been a while. And we have Cynthia Sue Larson on our show today, and we have so much catching up to do. And today I wanted to do something a little different. I wanted to invite Cynthia Sue to talk about what she would describe her expertise and current career focus. She writes books, she does coaching, she does speaking, and we see her all over these days. Cynthia, hello.
Hello.
Feel free to take it away.
Yes, well, I'm basically an author, so a lot of people know me as the author of Quantum Jumps. Also, I've got a website that I've been running for 20 years. So it started before this whole Mandela Effect thing got going. But ever since 2010, excuse me, I've, obviously my website was there in the 1990s. So I've been tracking this phenomena called the Mandela Effect before it was the Mandela Effect. So what do you call that? I don't know. But my degree is in physics. So I've really been studying behind the scenes what's going on with consciousness and the mind-matter interface all these years. Some people know law of attraction, some know manifestation. There are lots of catchy terms that fly in and fly out. Now we've got Mandela Effect. I think that's going to be here for a while because it's the closest thing to what I've been calling reality shifts since the very beginning. And that was a term fortuitously that PMH Atwater, the author of Future Memory and near-death experience researcher, she also came up with it. So I think, yeah, there we go.
Parallel evolution. So what was I just going to ask you? I was going to ask you about the first things that you noticed about Mandela Effect, and maybe just for people who are not necessarily familiar with Mandela Effect, give a brief little synopsis of what that is.
In America, gosh, a lot of people know it as the Berenstain Bears conundrum, where a lot of people are familiar with those books in America, maybe in the rest of the world too, English-speaking countries, I don't know. But there was some controversy about why did the books change? And it turns out the books didn't change. The author has always been Berenstain. But if you ask yourself, how do you pronounce Berenstain Bears? You notice I keep going back to Berenstain Bears. No, I certainly never call them the Berenstain Bears. And it just sounds weird. So there's, as to the attribution of what's going on, the mainstream current view is it's collective misremembering. So people are just getting confused. Berenstain looks like it might be Berenstain. I don't know. But for those of us who definitely notice something changed, it feels different than that. And it goes back and forth. Skeptics then tell you, well, the way the brain really works, we don't ever remember what we actually think we're remembering. We recreate the memory every time. You can easily be influenced by suggestion, power of suggestion. This is how magicians do their tricks, and then they'll show you something, and it's quite convincing. And okay, I hear that. But in my experience, I've also experienced personal Mandela effects, where I go to do the laundry, and I just, you know how you do something, you turn the knob the same way every day, go to turn the timer dial, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work because I'm turning it the wrong way. So something like that, that's not collective misremembering, that's not just confusion, that's, wait a minute, my motor memory is telling me to do something one way, and it's never been that way apparently. The timer, we didn't get a new laundry system in the house.
Right.
So something's going on.
Right. And where some people would say, oh, I think I've heard my mom say an elderly moment or something. So that's the sort of failing of the mind.
Right.
Something else going on, which I have a tendency to go towards, but yes.
Yes. So the personal kind of Mandela effects and the flip-flops were something, you witness it go back and forth, then you're well out of that collective misremembering problem area where that's the possible explanation. It starts falling apart right about there. And so, I mean, it's a nice one. And I think for all these years, that's what it's been called. Because when I'm doing research now to see how long has this been going on? How many times have we missed it? We thought something else was happening, but maybe an entire country believed one thing, like Thanksgiving Thursday is always what Thursday of the month in November. You know, for me, up until 2000, I think 16, it was always the third Thursday. And yet nobody's moved it. It sort of moved itself, or we moved. And that's where
Yes.
that's where it gets
Have
interesting.
you found anything? Have you found in your research, this is for a new book, right?
Yes, I'm putting together a book called Mandela Effect Society because I'm noticing that a lot of these Mandela effects are really bringing people together, even though, like I said, it's a very subjective experience. There's nonetheless quite a bit of collaboration required before you can even start noticing that something's going on. Without that, it's a lot easier to call it a senior moment or must be getting, a little bit older, forgetful. But what if it's not always just that? I mean, of course, there may be that going on as well. So the book is about the science, the history, the personality types involved, what's some of the terminology. This is a book that anybody could read if they want to understand it. Maybe they're married to someone who is seriously Mandela affected, and that's all they talk about. Of course, they probably don't want to read a book about this at that point. But if you care about someone, if it's your child, if it's your parent, your friend, this would be a good book that can give people a background on it. It's also helpful for those who are affected to understand there actually is a much bigger community than even they might realize. So it's kind of a twofold purpose. And I've now, yesterday I had 111 pages printed. So every day I've just, I know it's moving forward since the conference. That conference ended on November 11th. And this is very fast progress in just a month to get that far. But again, I've been working in this field for more than 20 years. So for me, I'm so excited that there are enough people now, more than enough to bring conferences together. We've had 2 on the East Coast, 1 on the West Coast. This West Coast one was actually an international conference. It also had HBO.
Wow,
And so I know.
that's really exciting.
It's super exciting. So HBO is there filming I think it's going to be a special feature on the quantum businessman because he was one of our speakers, and I know that they've been doing a profile. So
Who's
I'm
he?
hope his name is Christopher Anatra. He's the president and CEO of NECS. They write software for food distribution.
Uh-huh.
So grocery stores, when they want to order Hass avocados, and they're noticing that the spelling of the Hass avocado is not what it used to be. You don't even pronounce it. I mean, you say Hass, but
Yeah.
now it's spelled Hass. So if you spell it now, it's Hass. Never was Haas, Haas. And the inventory numbers can be a little bit different. So Chris put some YouTube videos out initially just to let people know, yes, data is changing, things are changing. Let me tell you about the Mandela effect. So that was historic in 2019, and a lot of historic firsts happened in 2019. And I think all of that energy just helped me feel like this is the time to really consolidate all the information I've been collecting, put together the new information that came out this year, and help people understand just how big this effect really is.
That's so beautiful. And it's such good timing, what's happening in our understanding of quantum reality, consciousness, our relationship with our reality. I really feel like there's this synergistic coming together of the collective where people they have sort of a baseline understanding. It's like permeated the field enough where these events can kind of start taking root. And I also see it a lot with my clients, and you may be seeing it as well. And I'm curious to know what you think, because I'm always looking for tools to help people adjust to this reality, because I'm hook, line, and sinker. You couldn't convince me otherwise.
Right.
But people who are starting to move into a more, I guess, nimble mind space where they realize that they have control over their reality, or they're starting to realize that the reality is very malleable. What do you see in terms of people and their struggles. I'm curious about what you see as challenges, and then what you recommend for people. What do you think of that, of talking about that?
Yeah, the challenges are interesting. It's a good point, because that comes up pretty early on. The Mandela Effect movie is coming out this week on streaming, and you can get it through Apple and Amazon. I'm not associated with it, except that I talked to the director yesterday on one of those interviews he was doing, a Media Blitz interview. And I
You're
was there with
a
a
huge energetic component of this movement. I'm certain.
yes. Oh, yes. I've been waiting and waiting for like 20 years. And I've watched things come and go, law of attraction, all this stuff. What the bleep? Now we've got Mandela Effect. Now we've got a winner. We've got something that people really, even if they don't understand it, here's the challenge of the Mandela Effect. Because this is the question I asked the director. What kind of advice would you give people who see your movie? And I'm asking that because I've been involved in this, like I said, 20 years. So I know what some of the reactions can be. And when you are just a member of an audience, you think you're watching just another movie, and then you find out, wait a minute, this is not just another movie. The stuff that they're referring to is actually happening. And that happens quickly. You just do some Google searches, and you can I'm not going to spoil the movie. I haven't seen it myself, but I've heard from people that did. And so I know that when you've watched the movie, then you can Google a few things, find out about the Berenstain Bears we just discussed, a few other real life Mandela effects, and an individual might, to their shock and surprise, find out, wow, I'm Mandela affected. And at that point, a couple things could happen. A lot of people, they have that moment of horror, because it's just broadsides them unexpectedly. Maybe they weren't prepared for it. They haven't been meditating. They're not familiar with seeing themselves as a active force in the universe, or whatever. It just scares them. Yeah. So they're not ready for it. Then a lot of people can successfully push that back. I was not able to do that. So then you get into the groups of people that are not able to push it back. And then the more they try to, the more it's almost like your subconscious or something is saying, no, you're going to wake up. And then you get more and more of these subjective experiences, like the knob that doesn't turn the right way. And then you realize, okay, uncle, this is happening. So my advice, just like, I think the advice that he gave was pretty good start. He's basically saying, be really happy with your life, no matter what's happening, because he's going, like, he was admitting that his own bias is that we're in a simulation. That's not my bias. I don't think it's your bias. Some of us, if we've been in this field, doing what you're doing what I do, we're coming from a different place because that's where we're working from. Mm-hmm. And for myself, I'm looking at it as reality is not so much changing as we are consciousness, and we're making those jumps. That's a huge jump for a lot of people to make. The advice that the director gives, David Guy Levy, he's basically recommending, just pay attention to your senses. Your relationships are real. Pay attention to what matters most to you and feel it. That's great advice.
Yeah, I love it. Well, so bringing in that simulator concepts, let's unpack that a little bit, because I mean, could it be that we're not only are we creating these quantum jumps in each moment, but that's also creating the simulator? Is that a fair assessment, or no? Am I off base?
Well, you're going where I tend to go with this. Gosh, the weather just changed. I know, it's okay. Keep thinking. I think I got it. No, I'm fine. Yeah. So what it feels like is that this is the consciousness. We are consciousness. We're making those jumps. And so it's easier for me to view it that way. When I look at the other possible explanations, simulation is the theory that a lot of people present as if it is a complete theory. And these are smart people. This is Elon Musk, and I forget who else, a whole bunch of people that are just saying this is clearly a simulation. Mm-hmm. And they don't notice they've fallen into a category error of logic. To me, it's very obvious, like, really, have they gone far enough? What are they simulating? Number one, what is being, so what's the real thing? And who is simulating?
Right.
So they haven't really gone that far. It's just a way to sort of stall things a bit while they install the artificial intelligence on quantum computers. but that's not going to solve it either.
So
So
are you saying that this is a spiritual versus non-spiritual issue, I mean, I just relate consciousness with spirituality, like it's perfectly blended in my awareness and so my consciousness is of spiritual origin. It is more than this. Well, I guess it comprises this, and I guess and I don't know if I'm hearing you correctly, that the simulation theory is more like a computer, more synthetic and less universal. I want to say is one is spiritual, one is not. One has sort of like we're bigger than this kind of dynamic, and the other does. I don't know. I know it's not very clear.
We don't really have a coherent, cohesive, complete theory at this point. It's really similar to the quantum physics situation where we don't have an interpretation that everyone can agree on. Right. Again, for the same reason, because consciousness is involved. Identical reason, identical problem. So the people that like the simulation theory are typically noticing the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics. They're noticing that there's this mathematical almost perfection to the universe that seems way beyond coincidence. And plus the quantization of things. Our technology has pixelation on our TV screens, so we think that we know what we're seeing. It's a leap of assumption. Yeah. So when you say simulation and someone's working with the mathematics, they've played with it, and instead of going toward a solution where unity consciousness could be capable of such a thing, regardless what you call that unity consciousness. Some people would call it spirit, like I would, you would. Some people would say, no, that's just unity consciousness. We don't know what it is. So it's, we're immediately in the there be dragons here part of the map. We've left all of our anchored points behind. We don't really have any way to say for sure what's going on. So I think it's important to admit that. Yeah. And not really feel bad about it, like you have to know exactly what it is or be exactly right.
Because this such an important point. You know, I was talking to a girlfriend on a walk, and so much comes during those walks, and what I was feeling like is, even in the metaphysical community, people who do feel like there's a spiritual component to this consciousness that we're experiencing, whether I guess it's mathematics or whatever, that what you just said about leaving it behind, just like acknowledging that we don't necessarily know, and having it be okay doesn't have to be a bad thing. And I feel like in that space has been where a lot of my leadership coaching has been evolving, because I feel like as businesses are starting to evolve, or like heart-centered entrepreneurs that I work with a lot, like you or whoever, they've reached almost this glass ceiling, is kind of how I see it. They've worked within the paradigm that is in existence, and there's so much more that they're ready to jump off from, but aren't really sure how do they get to the next step. I think what worked conceptually before isn't working in the same way. And this is totally just my perception, but I see it playing out where the efforting model has really lost its usefulness in a lot of ways. And so what I'm doing is I'm actually putting people in a trance state or hypnotizing them so they can draw forth their actual future. They can work with the streamers of consciousness that they can call towards them and start to recognize those streamers of consciousness to bring into their reality, to start construction of their future on a conceptual level, which we know is energizing their future. It's how we think, what we're focusing on, what we're manifesting in the future. And that seems really fun to me. It seems like consciousness is really like, so how do we operate now? Like, if that efforting model is no longer a thing, what do we do? And have you seen that yourself?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. And that's That was the main topic at our conference.
Really?
Every single talk is going to be videotaped and put for free on YouTube.
Oh, cool.
So the conference, yeah, it's amazing. We went through that. So if you watch them sequentially, it's perfect. If you don't have time, then you can just skip to the last one, which really goes into how to live that nonlinear lifestyle. But we progressed right through it. We did not organize that way at all. It organized itself.
So elegant.
So yeah. So I start off describing this whole business of what I've been doing for 20 years, but not just me, that we've had a legacy on earth of shamans and yogis and martial arts masters and people that do mind matter interaction all the time. So we don't need to be nervous about this. So I do an introduction to that, talk about myself, and then Christopher Anatra, the quantum businessman, comes on, and he presents these surprising new things that are coming in, like new kinds of animals that we've never seen before. Like literally, it's like an evolution is happening before our eyes.
Yeah, like that.
Like that.
Mm-hmm.
And he talks about the eye color on Gilligan's Island, like he had some videos about that. So he discusses that. And he lays the groundwork because this is a businessman. This is someone who's running his business and doing it intuitively. You know, he's making that switch. He's understanding that it's time to do that. And then our next two speakers.
Space.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then we've got Shane Robinson from Unbiased and on the Fence. And just the name Unbiased and on the Fence, that's his YouTube channel. He describes how when we look around at other people who think differently, we see the ones that are acting up. So if you're Christian, you see the Muslims, look at that, another one of those bad terrorists. And if you're a Muslim looking at the Christians, look at that, another one, going crazy over there. Another crazy atheist, whichever it is that you're not, you see the ones popping up and acting out. But if you get kind of above the cubicle level and you realize these are all people, we're all part of the same thing. And then the other thing he talked about is making that switch to the intuitive. And then the next speaker is Lauren Cannell-Pavelka. Both of these are authors. Shane co-authored a book, Mandela Effect, Friend or Foe. And Lauren she wrote her own book during a time that she was curing herself of an impossible situation with a genetic defect that her grandparent had died of and her father had, and now she has it. And she's at the Mayo Clinic writing this book about Mandela Effect or miracle effect. And for her, it's a miracle. So she talks about that, which is so cool. Yeah. Also getting into that intuitive state of being. And then I talk about the hero's journey with the Mandela Effect. What kind of personality types tend to be included that are experiencers, which kind don't, but that's okay. Then how to find your way through it, which might seem like you're going into the unknown. You have no idea what's going to happen. It's terrifying, but you've got mentors, you've got friends, and have a sense of humor. So that's my talk. Very encouraging.
Oh, you're going to put that in the book, right? The archetypes stuff.
Yes.
Good.
And then it's fantastic. And then our last speaker, she's the living embodiment of what she talked about, which is nonlinear lifestyle. And I don't want to give away what happens in her talk, but she also brought an art installation, which was all of these Mandela Effect pieces. And you can gain information by asking yourself, how is this change closer to truth? That's another good way to feel safe and a sense of faith, even when things are changing, because a lot of us get scared. Everything she teaches, and it'll be in her new book, Nonlinear Lifestyle, she's got it's not quite a GoFundMe, but kind of, you can pre-purchase it, which is going to create the book. And then she's doing some amazing work with that, first-rate stuff. I don't want to steal her thunder, but basically, I'm just hearing her spirit say, "You can't." Okay.
Yeah, you're promoting her.
I know. Okay. Well, basically, she says things like, "Nature makes no mistakes," and I can say that, but unless you actually know what that feels like, then it's just words. What's fun about Kimberly Lynn Hansen, that's the name of the author of the book and the speaker at the conference, is she's a Canadian artist, but she lives this. She really has days without time where you don't check your watch or your clock. And I've been doing that for years too. I'm pretty sure that's why I've been experiencing this for 20 years. Yeah. But I know she's doing it right, because what she talks about, what she does are the same thing. And then best of all, she's able to be so enthusiastic and share that enthusiasm. Here's how you do it. And it really gives people that sense of confidence, like, okay, I'm not going to freak out, even though I'm giving up that life on rails where I'm just going to do what I always did. And I made that switch myself. So it's safe. And I think you may have done the same.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So people can look to us. Yeah.
Different people have different rates of speed in that.
Right.
I think some people, like I will admit that I'm not afraid of sort of careening through life. So I'll just do stuff. Woohoo! And it's been quite an adventure. But people who have that sense that I've got to control how things are going to unfold have a harder time.
Yes.
Anyway, have a harder time going quickly into that and just intending to move more. I think at some point, just like with any decision we make, there's going to be a point where you have to just sort of double down and go there. And it takes a little bit of practice, but then once you're on the other side, it'll feel much more natural the more you do it. And then you'll sort of, it'll get easier. I mean, but you'll still have people telling you stuff like you're crazy. I had that the other day. I was talking to a guy. We had a great conversation. I was at a big table of dinner, friends that I was meeting, like a friend introduced me to. And I was having this great conversation with this guy. And then I started telling him about consciousness in my work. And we clearly were on the same page. And then I started talking about hypnotherapy and consciousness, and I was just so fully comfortable with what I was saying. He's like, what do you mean? Like, there's nothing beyond this. There's just us, and that's why we're so important to each other. And I was like, oh, well, I don't agree with you. And he literally said, you're crazy.
Right. Oh my gosh.
And I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to insult you, but nice. It was been a great talk. And it didn't, I think there have been times where I've been like, wow, what did I like hurt? I think I would be hurt in the past, but over time, I think it's going to get easier for everybody to start owning their own personal truth, because there's no universal truth, guys. I'm sorry. Like maybe there are things that are truisms, but however we perceive them, right, is going to be a little tweak on that truth. I mean, we could say, yes, the sun came up this morning. Yes, we all agree, but how the sun came up today is different from each perspective. And it's not a knock on truth. It's just, I think, a deeper, more intimate relationship with our own personal truth. That's just my take on it.
It's not just your take. It was the headline news of 2019 if I was in charge of the newspapers of the world. Because that would have been the headline for 2019. Like, we did it. There's no such thing as objective reality.
Oh my God.
And that was absolutely disproven in a quantum physics laboratory with an experiment, with the double slit experiment, with 2 observational devices set up to observe what's happening at the same time, same place. And what they observed is it's possible to have 2 accurate readings that are both reliable, both true, and exactly different at the same time in the same place. I love that. And that's matching what you see with your clients, what we see with Mandela effects. It's matching all of that. So it may sound crazy if people have bought into the idea that there's one objective truth and that there's this whole body of unchanging facts. But some of us are noticing the facts are changing, that we are visiting alternate histories. And this can be pretty easily shown to a lot of people. But like I said earlier, some of them veer back. One person calls it the Smith effect, like Agent Smith from the Matrix movie. It's kind of like, oh, I'm not supposed to believe that, even though I do remember Berenstain Bears, even though
there's
like
that. Maybe that's the phase we're in right now. Maybe, over time that will be something that is measurable that we could.
I think you're right. I think you're right, because I think we're seeing some looping.
Yeah.
And it's like people going back and they're doing the same thing again. Some people notice it. Like, didn't you just do that video before? And they're like, what video? I didn't do this as the first time. Like, seriously? But I've seen it.
Right,
So,
like deepening our breadth and depth of understanding of this very fluid experience. And I
right.
think it's a good time to read just a few sentences in your new blog post, because it really just, it's just so delicious to read. Music to my ears, how you write. The dawn of this new quantum age presents you with the radical new paradigm that you are not your body or your situation, but instead I just added a you, but instead are pure energy, pure consciousness. You exist in an interconnected holographic universe in which you are literally jumping from one parallel universe to another with every choice you make. Through such quantum jumps, in a moment, you can become smarter, more confident, happier, more outgoing, more effective, in better relationships, with more willpower, and less crazy. Just kidding.
Love it.
It's just an homage to all of you crazy people like me and Cynthia Sue.
Yeah, you're in good company.
Absolutely, the best.
I was going to say the best. And you said you had a bit of a quantum jump today, because when we were connecting,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I was just all of a sudden before we started, about an hour before we started, I started feeling really nauseous and feverish and just spinny. And I you know, what would I rather do was the question. Would I rather figure out a way of feeling good and having the interview and continuing that pathway of my day, or just going to bed, which would typically be, if I'm feeling yucky, I'll just like drop everything and rest. And I was like, no, that sounds really boring. I want to have my interview. I haven't talked to Cynthia forever. And here we are. And it's you I want to see. And that's the choice. And I feel pretty good. I don't feel like amazing, but I'm feeling better and better every second. And this is the choice that I made. I'm not in bed, and I don't think I have a fever. And I would say I'm at about 80% better than I was.
That's a big shift. So
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that. That's such a good one, because I think sometimes we can do that. We can feel something coming on and then kind of jump out of it, even as we're jumping in. Just tell yourself, no, that feels like I'm getting sick, but actually this is the tail end of whatever this is. I'm getting over it.
And it felt a little bit like an energy download.
That's right. You were mentioning that.
And I think you bring a lot of energy, and I felt it sort of through my energetic core. And I think that's really the decision that I made, was this is just energy preparing me for this interview and offering me more, and maybe it feels a little powerful. And so instead of equating it with feeling yucky, I'm equating it with just the power of consciousness and this work and the message.
Yeah, there is definitely energy happening now related to this this whole topic, and I can feel it too. There was a big change in November, and I think every day I'm feeling another jolt of it, another wave of it, that we're definitely, it's like a juggernaut at this point. Like all these years I've been kind of waiting and waiting. Have you ever seen the video of that meerkat that's kind of like, it's been on patrol for so long it starts dozing off? I don't know if you've seen that, but I felt like that. Funniest thing ever. I love little meerkats. When I went to that conference, I was like, okay, please send me a power animal. And what I got was the meerkat. So that I'm mentioning it because it's so gosh darn funny, but I've come to love it. It wasn't when I first got it, it's like, no. They're hysterical. They're so funny. They're like quirky little, they're intelligent, they're social. Yeah. So now I see why. Like, okay, they're social. They bring communities together.
Yeah.
But that video of the one falling asleep, that's how I felt. Like for 20 years, kind of like, okay, stay awake, stay awake, stay awake. I mean, you'd be there. And there'd be bright, yes.
Come on, you meant to stay with this. It'll all make sense soon.
Hang in there.
I feel like that definitely, for sure. But the writing of the book, I mean, I think you've positioned yourself beautifully, and I can't help but think that we're at the tip of the iceberg, and what all of you pioneers have been positioning from like you know, remote viewing to,
Yes.
you know, all of the people who work with consciousness like me, the hypnotherapists who are doing good, energy healers, Reiki 1 and 2, or, you know, people who are just learning Reiki and just using it in their life.
Yes.
You know, all of these transformative thought patterns are having an impact on how our reality is shifting. I have no doubt.
Absolutely. And trusting that intuitive process, learning to do things like dowsing that people may have never thought was possible. This stuff
Yes.
sounds so bizarre, but it's,
I just
yeah.
learned about some, who's that old Southern dude? I just learned about this dowsing guy. I can't remember his name. But yeah, I feel like there's maybe that looping is coming through with you know how like the DNA gets, there's like this editor, the editing mechanism in the DNA.
Right.
And so I'm wondering if as our consciousness shifts, I wonder if there's some sort of like, you know, because as above, so below, if there's some sort of like universal editor that's somehow shifting everything. I mean, I don't know, but it's like looping through changes things, like a reiteration or deeper understanding. I don't really know exactly what I'm saying.
Well, here's what I notice, and maybe you'll resonate with it.
Yeah.
Like I feel like I'm so much bigger than fits in my body, which sounds weird, but my consciousness is huge. So it's easy for me to imagine that, of course, I might be cycling through many versions of myself. And maybe a lot of the things I think are daydreams are actually real. And I've had people tell me you've bilocated, and I think that's what's going on. I think they literally are about that real. And I do have that much energy, and it can actually bilocate or, you know, teleport or whatever. I think this stuff's real, and it happens because our consciousness runs the show. And some of us, we've been growing our consciousness for, I don't know, lifetimes or whatever. It's like it didn't happen overnight, but we're now to a point where we're much bigger than ourselves, and you need to recognize that it's okay to learn something slowly. I'm a slow learner. I'm not fast like you. So for me, you know, I understand people that want to take their time and kind of get things right. I can relate to that. But here's the big idea. So if our consciousness is that huge and you're working with someone and hypnotizing them or whatever, like who is the I really? And you know, how many sessions is it going to take for them to get it if they're only embodying a part of it? And you see this with some of the multiple personality type people. You'll see like, wow, they are big. They've got all these different personalities, but they're one person. But that's true of all of us. What if that's true of all of us?
Yeah. So what we can, some fun stuff that I get to do in my work is connecting people with an ideal version of themselves. And that's outside the self, isn't it? I mean, you could imagine that it's happening within yourself, but I feel like if it's within the quantum field that you're actually calling forth an aspect of yourself that is already in existence, that it represents all of the things that you aspire to get acquainted with that aspect, with that you, that quantum you, and then perhaps even step into that version of yourself. Like, why not do that? Why can't we? Why, you know, we're totally unlimited if we allow ourselves to be.
And this is I don't know if you've talked to PMH Atwater, but that book I mentioned, Future Memory, it's all about that. And that's how she, like every decision she made in her life, it's like she could feel her future self. And then she'd make a move, like I need to move here. I need to do this. I need to talk to that person. Yeah. And it's totally that nonlinear lifestyle also. So PMH Atwater really is one of the pioneers in this field, but I love that you're doing it. I do this with clients also. You know, just showing them like there's so many possibilities. Some of them are adjacent, like right now. Some you might think are in your future, but time is nonlinear too. So it's interesting.
Right. And I think we're sort of recalibrating things to make sense on a more sort of unified level, because hypnotherapists or coaches even have been doing this forever. Just the whole sports analogy, you have a much more likelihood of winning the game if you visualize the win, right? And so in essence, you're calling forth your future self, and asking that future self to have won the game.
Mm.
Like you're playing the whole experience out in your mind and then coming back to what it is now, prepared for the win that you know that you've already visualized. Does that, am I explaining?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's true. And another similar supportive study had to do with, I think, basketball players. And they did a study just having people practice in their minds, making those perfect shots and doing all the actions, but not actually doing it. And that turned out to be just as good as practice if they're practicing in their minds with that much focus and doing the moves correctly, which is really good news if you're injured or traveling or whatever. You can't do your sport or whatever it is you want to practice. You can do it anyway.
Yeah. So daydream about it. You know, I think too, what I have difficulty with is when people say, "Oh, this is so out there," and I think what's happening is people are starting to have more applications to their daily life and seeing it, and as that happens, maybe it won't feel like such a shift, you know, where they're just like, all of a sudden, this is what I've always done.
Yeah, that's the expansion of collective consciousness. We are moving thanks to hitting the tipping point. I think we've got more than 10% people meditating in the United States right now. So that definitely has an effect. And thank goodness, because this is right when we need it most, when we've got these issues with climate change that people are concerned about. So if you know that you can do this and you can do it collectively, I believe that's what the indigenous people really were doing all along, is understanding to be guardians and safekeepers of the earth, and that you can dream with the earth. You can make this for all of us to be the best possible future. Because I really do believe we have to think collectively more than we ever have. Get past the greed, you know, because a lot of people previously, if you look at the self-help book section in the 60s or 70s, it might seem kind of greedy and self-focused. And I think we are definitely seeing a shift, or at least I'm hoping we are, toward more just optimization for the collective, rather than I'm going to claw my way to the top and I don't care who I step on. That's terrible. And I hope people aren't still doing that anymore. And that would be a spiritual ethic, of course. So we're getting back to the spiritual. So those of us who, if you're spiritual like you and I are, we would not be clawing our way to the top and stomping little people on the way up. That doesn't even work.
No,
but it's ethically bad.
I think when you go there, like, go ahead and go there. I mean, if we're infinite beings, there's no real shortage of time because you're infinite. And I have awareness of some doozy lifetimes where I was really power hungry. I just did some work around this, and oh my gosh, I'll have to tell you sometime. But it was holy moly. But I think what people have been taught is you can't make a change without being forceful. And I think this, in understanding consciousness, understanding activism takes on a whole new perspective, which is we have the ability to be activists within ourselves. And as we change our thought process and then meet people who are willing to do that together, we become an exponentially powerful force for change. I mean, it just happens. I mean, in Nepal, they have a police force that is meditating on reduction of crime.
Yes. So, and I think we've seen this too with transactional meditators who have gone to a community and then they've scientifically studied the drop off in crime in that area. And same thing with timed meditations that have had a global effect. So we know it works, and we're getting more and more people that meditate are aware of that unity consciousness. I think there's so much divisiveness sometimes when it comes to spirituality. That's what has, it's that same thing that I was mentioning with the cubicle walls and people acting up. Like, they're acting up over there. Look at those bad guys. And they're not bad guys. There's just one or two bad apples popping up and doing crazy stuff. So crazy is that. It's not you. It's not you doing, your good thing where you are. Crazy would be like, that's not good for the collective. And I think we can all agree, anybody who's doing crazy stuff, the real crazy, not you, but that would be the real issue. And I love what you're doing with your healing, with the going back in that access to all times, all realities. And because there you're able to experience, that release of like, oh my gosh, it's like yesterday. I don't need to do that anymore. And so
Yeah.
the work you do is extraordinary because it touches those really subconscious beliefs that drive everything. And people may not realize it, but that's, when your subconscious is showing this is what I need. And if you think like, oh, I can just put that under the carpet, I don't need to look at it, that's not going to work. So.
Well, and thank you for saying that. One of the motivating forces in this work is that there's no usefulness in the shadow self, because I believe that as consciousness is expanding, the objective or the conclusion or the result is we're going to be telepathic. So if we're telepathic, what's hidden? Nothing's hidden. So we have, and I think in order for our expansion of consciousness, for our awareness to go beyond what we're familiar with now, we will have to reconcile our shadow. And the shadow isn't anything to be afraid of. We have a lot of fear languaging and storyline around shadow, but it's really just aspects that we don't want to look at and that we create sort of a big hairy ordeal around. So it seems more frightening than it is. But I created a class to do in a yoga studio because I want this stuff to be easy for people to start transforming. So I'm doing what's called mind yoga. And I don't want to, but suffice it to say, this stuff is coming out. People like utilize these tools to make your life easier. It doesn't have to be this like, rawr, like pointing. It's binary thinking. It's like, come on guys, like there's a third option here. It's not just you and me, and or it's not just us and them. We're all, like you said, just stand on the chair above the cubicle and you're all wanting exactly the same thing. I saw a really fun, it was a cartoon once, and I may have shared this on a show, but it was a hand underneath water like this, just drawn, and there was a face drawn on these fingers and these fingers. So from above the water, they all looked like individuals, and they were like, he said that, she said this, but under the water, they're all part of the same hand.
Right.
And that's how we are.
Yeah, there's a lot more connection than we acknowledge often. And you're right. I agree with that about we're becoming telepathic. I think a lot of people are noticing it. The Myers-Briggs intuitive feelers are noticing it. But the majority of our population is still not the intuitive feelers. So they would be people that are more just doing their job. And, so there is still that huge part of the population that we have as family members, as neighbors, as friends. So that's definitely part of the challenge too. Like I'm doing my part. How come these people get a pass? How come they don't even look at it?
Well, I just look at it as they're in their own time frame.
That's right.
They're doing it at their rate. I mean, I believe that you and me and people who are connecting at this time, we intended to be here like at this time and for this stuff.
Yes.
Like specifically as a part of our soul intention. And so we're all connecting and building this really powerful, what I would call like light structure of a new reality. And, and then other people are just trudging along. I don't know what that really, like how that would look like on a graph or in like real reality, but I guess the easiest way for me to think about it is vibrationally and not in a hierarchical sense, but just sort of like energetic frequencies. And I think
that's my example too. I use it in reality shifts, like dimensional consciousness. Think of it like keys on a piano. So it's not like the high keys are better than the low keys, because they're not.
Yeah.
And people, there's definitely a shift going on. That's okay, but you don't need to worry about it. There's no one that's better than the other. Like some people like a color better. That's also vibrational. But you can't say that red is worse than purple or violet.
Right, like the really purples are hanging out with the other purples and for now. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, and I don't mean to be divisive at all. I believe that when we're not in this physical body, that it's totally clear that we're all a part of the same brilliant experience of life, of energy, you
And
know?
we're all astral travelers. We all dream. So people
Yeah.
might say like, well, that's not me, but yes, it is. So that is everybody, and we do dream together. And
Oh,
I've had recurring dreams where I've helped people. Like they're it's like the dream starts over. Like, well, that didn't go too well. Let's start over. So,
it's awesome.
and I wake up like, well, that took a while, but they finally got it, and that's a good feeling. It's like, yay!
I
Trust your intuition. Yeah.
my dreams, I need to, I really want to do more dreaming. A lot of times in my dreams, I'm hanging out with people I don't know, and I'm like, there's a lot of interaction going on, but nothing that I really am bringing back that I remember. You know, it's very active, but I don't really, nothing is really significant that I can pinpoint.
Interesting. Well, when you describe it, it sounds like you're part of, like you said, we're the team that's here now. It sounds like you dream and there you are with the team. Like, what's going on? Got any good news? And you're like, yeah, the usual. Like, oh, good. I haven't seen you for a while. You look different. Yeah, you too. I don't even recognize you. I don't either, but I know you.
I mean, I'm sure, I would imagine, because when I go to conferences and stuff where I know that people of a very like mindset are coming together, I know I've met them before, but I know that I've not met them. So it's like, oh, you're here. Never met you. Great to see you. Did you have that when you went to the Mandela Effect conference where you're recognizing people on a soul level, maybe?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And like I said, the talks went together as if there was some master orchestrator putting the whole thing together. The whole conference organized itself that way. And I'm finding that's true of the book I'm working on too. So there's definitely this hidden order of awareness that really is ready to express itself, ourselves. You know, it's ready for us to come into our own. And I think that's that energy that, you know, that you're feeling, that huge surge of energy. I am too. And it's big. So it's kind of like, wake up, it's time.
Yeah.
And but
Yeah.
it's in a good way. It's nothing to panic or worry about. It's more just trust your intuition, know that it's going to be okay. It's, you know, things are fine. But it's really, like you said earlier, also, you don't need to force your way in the world.
No.
It's a little different than that.
Oh,
That
yeah.
doesn't work right now.
It's subtle. It starts very subtly, and then it's a focus thing. Is for me anyway. It seems like something that's almost imperceptible. People who have done energy healing, like when they're learning how to sense the energy, they may not even know that they've been sensing it. Their subconscious mind is already processing that energy, but it's becoming intentionally connected to it and conscious of it, that
Yes.
that starts to become more of a fun thing to play with. But well, you know what? We're starting to wind down at the end of the hour, and I want to ask you, what kinds of people do you want to call you, and what kinds of clients do you like to work with the most?
Well, I work with anybody who feels called to work with me, and but my preference would be people who are um, basically similar to myself. You know, that they are experiencing these reality shifts, because then that's really exciting, because then you can ramp that up and go quite far. So I love that. And it turns out that even though I'm the INFJ personality type on Myers-Briggs, 1.5% of the population, but if you get together like a conference of people experiencing the Mandela effect, we're the majority. The minority is the majority. That's interesting. That
Yeah.
we're like 27% of the group of experiencers, like almost a third. And then the other intuitive feelers would be there too. And then you've got like 50% of the room covered by empaths, healers, you know, the people that you work with, I would imagine, in large part. So these are the ones who are leading the way right now. And I love working with people like that. Sometimes they doubt themselves. There's a lot of, sometimes there's guilt or feelings of I'm doing things wrong, or I've been called crazy. My family calls me crazy. all of that. But they're not crazy. And this is our time. This is, the world is changing and the world needs us now just to be ourselves.
And that's beautiful. And do you think, I think this anyway, do you think that there are, like, the kids coming in are going to be more on the intuitive end of the spectrum?
They already are.
Yeah.
I think we're already witnessing that. And I was, I don't want to, I know we're wrapping up, so I don't want to go into some.
Oh no, please do. Please do. There's no real.
Oh, this is epic woo woo.
Yeah, I want people to know that they can work with you. And I think that is an amazing opportunity for people who may be going through this shift.
Well, I'm just going to say that I'd had what you might call dreams. To me, it was very real, like lucid dreams of this collective consciousness changing, like a global mind redesign that was happening in the 80s, 1985, 86. I was really part of that behind the scenes in the dream space. And so when those indigo and crystal kids came in, and they are telepathic, I was observing those mind designs, and I was basically voting in favor. That was the objective, was to become more shared group consciousness. That's our time. That's what's happening. And so I was really on the forefront. I know. So I was part of that. I got to look at all the different designs and say, like, yeah, let's go with this one. And that's what's happening. That's exactly it.
Are you writing about that?
I have not written about that. That's about as far out there as I go, and that gets real far out there. But
that's so fascinating. Oh my gosh, I'm just hungry for that. I want to know about that more. Well, when you're ready to talk more in depth about that, I think that's huge, because I would bet money that people have had that experience as well. And that's a very particular point of view, I would imagine. Basically being a part of the planning process and being aware of it, of the evolution of the direction of the planet.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty exciting. So it's just good to be able to say, yes, it's happening. We're part of it. And I don't know. I think for people that believe it, then they can say, like, wow, that's cool. And then the ones, I think what I've wanted to do all along is reach out to everybody, not just people that are necessarily the intuitive feelers, but everybody, because we're all on the same planet together. We're one big family.
And we all have feelings, and I think, and we all have intuition. And part of what I'm doing is helping people to navigate their intuitive aspects and become stronger, which is why I call it mind yoga. And so just strengthening it. So, and I get this because, of remote viewing. I mean, everybody is capable of remote viewing. That was something that has been proven, and that's intuition. And so we have these extrasensory capabilities that we're all hardwired for. Let's just drop into them and have way more fun with it. But then there's, on top of that, as we tap in, what are we really here for? So connecting with our purpose. And so there are people coming online at different levels. And I think if you're watching this and you're getting like a percentage of what we're talking about, this may be new to you, or you can kind of relate, I do want you to contact Cynthia Sue Larson or contact me. That information will be in the description box. We want to make it easy for you to open up to what your soul is bringing forward, and it's time on the planet for all of us that are feeling called to sort of step into this. And if it's not us, find somebody else that you resonate with. There's a wonderful conglomeration of beautiful way showers out there that are really, I think, just here to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't say it better than myself.
Aw. Well, I love you, and I love the work that you're doing, and I so appreciate your time coming on the show.
And if people are interested in seeing energy, that is a book I wrote too, Aura Advantage. It's been out for a while, but that's a good one too. Just to
so good.
Expand your high sense perception.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, I
Yeah.
didn't share that. She makes the work is so accessible. Her books are fantastic. So I will put a link to her website, of course, in the
Yeah.
description box. And please feel free to ask any questions. And if you want to directly connect with Cynthia Sue, you can always just say this is for her, and I can forward those questions on to her too. We just want you all involved.
Yes. Thank you so much.
You're welcome so much. Well, until next time, take care of yourselves and your loved ones, and we're sending lots of love your way too. All right. All the
Bye-bye
best.
for now.
Happy holidays.
Yes.
Bye.